Louise Adler, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you for having me.
Adelaide Writers Week has now been cancelled for 2026. Did it have to come to this?
I think unfortunately it did. It proved to be untenable. I think when we look back on this history, we will see a masterclass in poor governance, an act of cultural vandalism, a moment when 180 writers said we will not support censorship, we will not support the denigration of one particular writer. And we can go into the details of that, but I think this is a landmark, a watershed moment in the history of Adelaide Writers Week. But it is of a piece with all the other issues that we've seen unfold in the last few years in the arts community, whether we're talking about Khaled Sabsabi at Creative Australia, whether we're talking about the MSO and Jason Gillam, whether we're talking about Bendigo Writers Week. We've had a succession of dramas of this sort where political interference and donors and lobby groups have been able to come in and have an influence and an effect on what is programmed and what is not programmed.
What evidence is there of political interference in the decision to disinvite Randa Abdel-Fattah?
Well, the evidence is the Premier of South Australia has been absolutely upfront about him and his own involvement in communicating to the board of Adelaide Festival that he strongly was opposed to Randa Abdel-Fattah's presence and invitation. So he's been absolutely upfront and honest about that.
The Premier today said he was all simply about trying to oppose hateful rhetoric. And he got quite emotional, Louise Adler, in expressing his point of view today. Here he is.
I do my best to examine my conscience and offer a view that I believe is consistent with the interests of compassion and advancing the cause of people treating each other with decency and humanity, regardless of their background. It's genuinely what I try to do.
So there you saw the Premier. Do you believe Premier Malinauskas was coming at this from a position of decency and humanity?
I would hope so. I've got no evidence to the contrary. But I wonder where his compassion and humanity and sensitivity was to Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah and the fact that her work as a Palestinian writer, academic, esteemed award-winning writer, and the history that she carries with her and the recent events where 70,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. Where is the shared humanity and the understanding and compassion for Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah? Because I think the statement of the former board included the words cultural sensitivity. And I wondered, I understand we all should embrace the idea of cultural sensitivity, but I wonder where the cultural sensitivity was to the one Palestinian writer who was deemed inappropriate for a Writers' Festival.
Well, that was the point. You're going to the point the board made in agreeing to disinvite Abdel-Fattah, saying in their view it was not culturally sensitive to invite her to appear, even though they stressed her writings had nothing to do with the Bondi terror attack. It would not be culturally sensitive for her to appear at Writers' Week so soon after Bondi. Was that a reasonable point to make?
Actually, the word salad of the statement issued by the board in invoking Bondi suggests a kind of implied dog whistle that actually she is deemed as a Palestinian. The only writer, by chance, happens to be Palestinian, but it's actually not by chance. She is not to be invited. She's to be disinvited. So I think that the invocation of the Bondi issue, of the tragedy and atrocity of Bondi, we have to think about that very seriously. Because if that was not pertinent, why was it in there? If we were not raising perhaps the perception that she had something to do with the Bondi atrocity, it should never have been invoked in that very clumsy statement.
In fact, was the board under pressure, to your knowledge, to remove Dr. Abdel-Fattah before the Bondi attack?
I wouldn't know whether there was pressure exerted from the Premier's office or from the Department of Premier and Cabinet or from outside influences. There has certainly been a history dating back to 2023 of lobbyists, pro-Israel lobbyists, arguing against the inclusion of Palestinian writers in the festivals that I've directed. This is a long story. They were assisted and abetted by the Murdoch press in a campaign to silence particular Palestinian writers who came to Writers' Week in 2023 and conducted themselves with civility, respect and empathy. In fact, it went so far as the Premier, who we've just watched on your program, actually announced at the town hall event with 1,200 people watching on that he had thought about cancelling the funding of Writers' Week. He had thought about his own objections to a particular writer's viewpoint, and he had come to the conclusion that if we were to be cancelling a writer, if a politician of the day or a government of the day was to cancel a particular writer or to exhort the board to cancel a particular writer, we might as well be living in Putin's Russia. And I'm wondering what we make of that contradiction, that in 2023 he's able to be clear that he's entitled to his own view, he's entitled not to go to her session, as we all are, or any other session at Writers' Week. That's the joy of a democracy. But in 2026, we are not to have that kind of conversation.
There's freedom of speech, and there are some of the comments made by Dr. Randa Abdel-Fattah on social media over recent years. In March 2024, she said, quote, "If you're a Zionist, you have no claim or right to cultural safety," unquote. At the start of last year, she wrote, "May 2025 be the end of Israel." Has she gone too far in some of the comments she has made about Israel and Israelis on social media?
From my point of view, I keep saying this, I don't invite writers to Adelaide Writers' Week because of their social media activity. Actually, those two statements have since been deleted. I don't know when they were deleted, but they're certainly deleted.
But the point is, I guess she made those statements.
Yes, those statements exist, but she's not been asked to come to Writers' Week because of her social media feed. She's been asked to come to talk about a novel she's written called Discipline, a novel that's topical of this moment, and I thought was worthy of a conversation.
Can you understand why some of those comments would have angered some Jewish Australians?
Oh, yes, but I have to say to you, we platform and program people with a variety of views, including, for example, in 2026, we plan to have Tony Abbott talk about his book, which celebrates the colonisation of Australia. And I think that's the opportunity that we offer at a Writers' Week for people with a variety of views that may be deeply offensive to some of us, whether it's Dr. Abdel-Fattah's comments or it's Tony Abbott's comments. There are people who are going to not like those comments. But that's the joy of living in a democracy, is that you can come, you can listen, you can decide I don't want to listen to this person's point of view. But actually the point of a Writers' Festival is to discuss ideas that are challenging. There are 180 writers that have withdrawn in 3 days. And they have withdrawn, some of them because they support Dr. Abdel-Fattah's viewpoint, and some of them, overwhelmingly, I think, have recognised that this is a moment of censorship. This is a moment where freedom of expression matters, and that's what's at stake here.
So the 2026 Adelaide Writers' Week is now cancelled. Is there any hope it can be resurrected from 27 onwards?
So I've been coming to Adelaide Festival since I was 17 years of age, and so I'm one of the many people who are completely devoted to the wonderful opportunities that exist to enjoy culture in all its diversity in the first weeks of March. Adelaide Writers' Week will rise from the ashes. I think this is an appropriate pause. It would have been impossible, it was untenable given so many writers had withdrawn to continue in this year. But I'm quite confident that in 2027, Adelaide Writers' Week will be back and triumphant.
You wrote in your resignation statement today in The Guardian that the Adelaide Writers' Week, in your view, is the canary in the coal mine. What do you mean by that?
I mean that the capacity for political interest groups and politicians of the day and citizens who have checkbooks are able to influence the curatorial independence and judgments of various arts organisations. We have had a catalogue of those incidents in the past, and I think what's happened in Adelaide Writers' Week is the canary in the coal mine. This is what's coming to us now, that we are, if you like, after Bondi, in a heightened state, not of emotion. There are people who feel deeply grieved, as we all should, at that atrocity, but there are people who feel deeply that it is important to control what artists say and what artists make. And that's the problem here. So from my point of view, there's a very important lesson in here for the arts community and those people who feel committed to a practice of freedom of speech, freedom of expression and inclusivity and civil discussion.
Louise Adler, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.